I'm very excited to have this conversation because this is something I talk about a lot with my friends. Like constantly we're texting about this is the roommate phase with your partner after giving birth because it is so real.
Yeah.
And I don't know one person, maybe someone's listening that has, like, that's so awesome for you. And I really do love that for you. But I feel like it's a universal experience that we all go through. And I don't say that to, like, wish it upon anyone. I just say that in the reality that, like, your life changes.
In a blink.
Yeah, in a blink. Your priorities change. Everything that's on your plate changes. And it's not easy. Like, yes, I think that we're sold this all like, oh, you will love your partner so much more because you're seeing them as a parent. And sure, that's true. And it can be really fucking hard.
Right.
So I would love for you to explain the work that you're doing in general, but then I want to dive into this topic of like, how do we navigate this phase?
Okay. Well, I'm a postpartum therapist, or I work with moms in early motherhood and expecting moms. So a lot of my work is one-to-one individual therapy with moms. But oftentimes we start on one topic of postpartum stuff, and many times we are led naturally to relationships after baby. Actually, the first reel that I had go viral on Instagram was a video of me and my husband, and I think it had something like things we wish we knew before we had a baby. It's like my first million plus reel, and I wasn't even trying. I'm like, these are things that I wish that I knew. And the comment section was just crazy with moms like, I wish the same things. I wish somebody warned me. So slowly over the past year, a big, I would say like some of my niche has gone directly towards just hitting on that point for moms. Because I don't think anybody is prepped. Like nobody wants to tell you beforehand, hey, your relationship's going to get rocked like after you have this baby. So I think once you're in it, or at least for me, once I was in it, I really felt isolated. Like I felt like everybody else seemed to be okay. Like what were we doing wrong? Did we miss something? Why do I feel on the brink of like sometimes leaving this marriage? What's going on? So that comes up a lot in one-on-ones. And then I do run groups for moms virtually and in person. And it's always a topic.
Always a topic.
Yeah.
And I think that sure, no one wants to like terrify you. I hate the just waits.
Right.
So I get that. But B, I think even I will use an example of a friend I have who just had her first. She's like said this to me and our other friend, you guys have prepared me in every possible way you could in our group chat. I'm witnessing everything you're going through. I'm hearing it. But I never could have really understood it until I lived it myself.
Right.
And I feel very passionately about that being the case for so many aspects of postpartum.
Right.
Even like the sleepless nights. You can prepare yourself. Oh, I'll be getting up a few times a night.
Yeah.
You can never understand the actual exhaustion.
The deprivation is so
that
bad.
feels you like the next day that you will experience.
Right.
So in terms of this roommate phase, I use that term. Is that like a common term? I feel like I say it all the time.
It is a common term. And there's therapists out there who like don't love the phrase or use a different way. I don't know, because it's something that I feel like they think eventually you get through it. But for me personally, I'm so attached to the phrase because I've lived it 3 times about to be 4, and that's exactly it. It feels like passing ships in the night. And I guess I shouldn't say therapist, but other content that I've come across is like, let's nick the roommate phrase and do, I don't even remember what the alternative was. But it feels like the roommate phase because you're 2 people living in the same house.
Yeah.
What you had like 24 hours before has completely, especially if it's your first, has completely shifted and changed as soon as baby arrived. And so it does feel very much like you're living with a roommate, which is why I think so many people attach to that. Now, do you get through it? I mean, hopefully yes, right? Like we won't speak for everyone. But I also think making note of like each time that you have a baby is a different lived experience. And because you have 2, I have 3, about to have 4, it's going to be different the 4th time. That just because you've done it once doesn't mean all of a sudden we've mastered it. And we're good.
And I want to dive into what we both, or what you're seeing people feel. But on that note, I remember my first time being rocked of like, yes, I love you deeper than I ever did, and you frustrate me more than you ever have.
Right.
Like, it's that duality.
Yeah.
And also, I miss us. I miss connecting with you. I miss doing things with you. I miss not talking about schedules and wet diapers and who's doing feeds. Like, I miss the non-logistical aspect of our relationship, which is why it does feel so roommate.
Right.
Also, like, sex is completely off the table.
Right.
Especially in the beginning, but especially if you're breastfeeding, like the touched out, you just hormonally, you're going through a fucking lot. So that adds to the roommate. And I remember being really scared the first time of like, oh, what is happening? Thankfully, we found our footing and we got back to an even deeper relationship than we had once had, which is the goal.
That's the goal. Yeah. Eventually.
But the second time, I remember thinking, is this going to happen again? Is it not? And it did, but I will say I found it easier the second time because I had the lived experience to know we can go back, where there was so much fear the first time.
Right.
Did you feel that?
It's interesting because my transition from 1 to 2 was my hardest transition, which I feel like then our marriage took another hit. And I think it's all going to be personal to each mom.
Agreed.
Because my son was born Christmas Eve, so we were in the height of flu and RSV season, and he caught RSV at 4 weeks. And we were like, in the hospital, and again, like navigating, now we have another child at home. And so it felt like, to your point, we had the lived experience of doing it once before, but then we got rocked by something that we just didn't expect. Like, we didn't expect to have a hospital visit with a 4-week-old and a toddler at home, and navigating, he was working and who's going to take off to do the shift at the hospital. And so I feel like making note too of, even when you have the lived experience, there's things that happen that are out of your control. Like when you become a mom or when you have a baby again, that even when you have the lived experience, it doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing, because we've done this before, we've been here before.
And I agree. I actually had I don't even know if I've shared this. We had a hospital visit 2 weeks and a sleepover with, thankfully it was a common cold, but his respiratory rate was very high, so we had to stay overnight for monitoring, all of that. And had that been a first, I think I would have been more terrified, but I would have felt more connected to my husband through that experience, because we would have only been focusing on him. And literally on our way to the hospital, we were bickering about a disagreement of how he got sick and what we could have done. And it all stemmed from me feeling guilty and responsible.
Right.
And like this was our fault, even if it wasn't.
Right.
And then he couldn't stay. He had to go. He was left. Also, only one parent was allowed to sleep over, which I kind of thought was crazy. But I then was in the hospital alone with him, 2 weeks postpartum, a 2-week-old baby. He's home with our toddler. Like, that felt, as you're saying, like a whole other milestone, or not milestone, a whole other hurdle of isolation and like not a barrier between us, but it was like, we're not even together.
It causes a rift though. Like, and you wouldn't expect to be bickering on the way to the hospital with a 2-week-old in the back, but that's what happens, because you're not casting blame, but you feel guilty. Now you have to figure out logistics at home. It's like the perfect storm. For there to be more disconnect in a moment, like you're saying, where you feel like if it was your first, it's like we would be leaning into one another. Like there would be no responsibilities at home. Like we would be more connected. And that's just not the case when you add another kid into the mix. So that's why I think it's important to just put some emphasis on each experience with a baby is a different experience than the one before. And the same goes for your relationship.
Yeah. Because yes, you have the lived experience to know you can hopefully get back, but it's also just the additional logistics or what causes so much of the roommate phase. Right. So what have you found with the women you work with to be the thing that like they are struggling with the most in this period of time?
One of the biggest things is the expectation of what we think partner is going to be like once baby's here. And I feel like that sometimes you're unknowingly doing before baby arrives. It's just this image of what you think your family is going to look like once baby gets here. And if it looks any different, that makes it even harder, because when we have an expectation set here and the person comes in here, it's like a lot of the moms that I work with will be like, well, I just want him to know what to do. Like, I'm sick and tired of telling him. And like a lot of our work is around, okay, that's an expectation and a wish that you have for him. But if he doesn't meet you here, you're going to rage because, and he might not know. Like, if he was here in the room with us talking, he may say, like, I had no idea that she wanted me to do that. Right. So a big piece of it is the communication piece is lacking behind the expectation. But a lot of the moms that I find that I work with is this, I want him to understand what I'm going through, especially early on in postpartum, and what it was like for me to birth and deliver this baby and now be postpartum and raw and milk is coming in and am I going to nurse, and if I do, I'm the one that feeds the baby, and how are you going to help me, and now I'm resentful because you're sleeping and I'm up. That oftentimes, like, backing down on the expectation of what you thought it would look like and communicating how you can get that support from them versus trying to, they're not going to understand what we went through. Like, I've done it 3 times and I'm like, he's just never going to understand what it feels like for my milk to come rushing in and for it to be leak. Like, and I'm not going to waste time getting him to understand that. I'm going to focus on how I need him to support me.
And can I also say, like, I think I'm big on managing expectations, not even with my husband, in life. Like, when reality is different than my expectation, historically, that is what has caused a lot of rift in my relationships, family, personal life. Pregnancy being a huge one. I had incredible expectations for it, and then mentally I just really did not enjoy being pregnant, and I was heartbroken over that. But I think we can never truly explain to anyone who has not experienced it what it feels like to go through those things. And I think it's a false hope or reality to ever believe that we could. So like you said, like, I understand he can see it all. He can watch the baby come out of my vagina. He can watch it all happen. He'll never fully get it, and I can't expect him to. But what I can expect and vocalize is for him to show up in every avenue of the way to support me through that. And I think being as specific as possible of, like, you know, I'm big on division of labor. So like, you're owning these tasks because I'm recovering. Like, I will not touch a pump part. I will not touch a dish. And I don't mean that to sound like a princess, but like, I just
I'm recovering.
Like,
and let's bring attention to the fact that there's a lot of spouses out there that don't step up and do that. And when that happens,
that's a whole other issue.
And I just want to take the time to normalize couples therapy, like, when you're in the throes of postpartum, because one of my biggest regrets is that my husband and I ended up doing couples therapy, but our daughter was already, like, older. I'm like, wait, why weren't we doing this when she was first born? Because we could have.
I mean,
there's no time.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like, when would you fit in couples therapy with a newborn? I do agree that that's probably the most beneficial time to be doing it.
But for the moms out there who feel like exactly what you're saying, like, wait, I love what she's saying of, like, these are your tasks while I'm doing this. There's a mom out there whose partner is like, no, that's not my task. Like, I'll do some of it, but you have to step up, like, when you feel a little bit better in 5 days, who is genuinely listening to this, like, wait, I don't have a partner that will do this. And that is problematic. Like, that is when you have to think, are they going to step up and support me? Like, how are we going to navigate this if there's really a rift in, you know, it sounds like your partner was like, yep, I'm on it. Like, I'm doing it.
Yes.
Which is what we want for everybody. But there are couples out there where, and I know from moms I work with 1-to-1, because I've made several referrals of, like, you need to do couples work or bring him to this session because there's something that's not connecting between both of you and what you both need. So I just want to, and I agree with you, like, there's no time. There's no time to do
I mean,
therapy.
That's
There's really not.
Sucks. That's really, like, when it's the most important. And I remember my first time I paused my own individual therapy. And the second time I was like, we are not fucking doing that again.
No.
Like, I breastfed during my sessions. I was in bed half of them.
Yeah.
Like,
I was going to say, that's the best thing about telehealth. Like,
Yes.
even the moms I work with, like, bring the baby to the session. I have toddlers that are in the background. Like, no apologies needed. I don't care if they're making noise. Like, just you showing up in the season that you're in.
It's so important.
Right. And so there is one beauty in telehealth is that, like, if you desperately need to do the work, like, bring the baby to the session.
And I've been able to stay with my therapist for 6 years after a move, which is like a gift for me because she knows all the fucking players. She knows everyone. For the people who are listening who are in this phase of life and desperately want out, because I think we all want out when we're in it.
Yeah.
What advice? Yes, obviously couples therapy I think is huge when it's necessary. Not even when it's necessary. I think it's helpful for everyone.
Right.
But what are some other tangible things that you see work?
Yeah.
Whether it's personally or with your clients.
Well, first, I think it's two categories, right? Because if there's expecting moms listening to this, I do think that there are things that you could be communicating before baby gets here. Okay. And that's where I think we're missing the gap of, like you said before, we don't want to terrify people. Like, I would never say to somebody, yeah, at one point I didn't know my marriage was going to make it. Like, I actually considered, like, should we live apart? Would that be better for us? I don't want to scare somebody, but also to say, just if you feel that way, like, you are not alone. There are so many other couples out there who really feel like, are we going to make it? Like, is a baby going to be the thing that breaks us? So to the expecting moms listening, it's like there are things you could be doing in terms of communication if you have expectations for what it's going to look like. If, like you're saying, I'm not going to clean the pump parts, like, talk about that stuff before baby gets here and take that from someone who's been through it and also works with moms who have those expectations. But if you're already in the thick of it, one thing I always say, I mentioned this in the marriage guide that I told you about, that I do think is possible, is to carve out 10 minutes. That's it, of the week. Like 10 minutes of the week. It's a busy time. You have a newborn or however old the baby is, and lay everything out on the table. And there's an agreement beforehand, like, we are not, if this gets to an argumentative level, if we start bickering and shouting, it's over. If we're 5 minutes in and for 2 minutes in, and we will try again. But make this the time in the week where you say, like, this really worked this week. Like, when you did XYZ, to point out the good stuff. Or I kind of have this expectation that I would really like help with blah, blah, blah. And here's how I think you could help me. And this is like a two-way back and forth dialogue. That's something that I recommend to all the moms that I work with, whether it's individual work or group work. I feel like carving out time of, like, we're going to communicate at some point. Like, even if we can't communicate, on Tuesday, we know that we have this little 10-minute thing coming up, and try to do it. Like, babies sleep for 10 minutes at some point. So try to make an effort in setting it up, carving the time, having the conversation would be one tip I have if you're already in the throes of it. Another thing that is important even in my own marriage, and I did a lot after my third. With my first, I felt hesitant to give feedback, and I held on to it, and the resentment grew and grew and grew until, like, you can't handle it anymore and you're screaming, which nobody wants to do. So over the years, like, one thing I wish I knew sooner is just to speak on what I'm feeling, like, when I'm feeling it. Like, I'm feeling really blank right now. And I need you to know that, instead of harboring it, because one of the biggest words that comes up in the work that I do is, like, I resent the shit out of my husband, or I resent the shit out of my partner.
Resentment.
Yeah.
I feel like I totally agree. I try not to let emotions fester, because festering leads to resentment. And some of the things that I remember resenting my husband for the first time around, I didn't feel resentment the second time around, but the first time I definitely did, weren't even really fair to him, because I'm like, your nipples don't breastfeed.
I just did a post on that the other
day. You just don't. Okay?
Yeah.
So, like,
you can't.
I can't really resent you, but if I could speak up in more, like, while I'm feeding, I want you to do X, Y, Z, so that that's not also falling on me.
Yeah.
And eventually, yes, we had that conversation. He took on so much. Great. But I let it fester for a little too long. And I think I also just felt jealous, because I'm like, your world wasn't rocked in the same way. It was. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm not taking that away from you. Yes. But, like, when you have 20 minutes while the baby's napping, you can hop on the Peloton.
Do it. Yeah.
And work out. My vagina is healing.
Right.
I'm not stepping near that thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that's even what I want to do in that moment, but I just remember hearing the Peloton in our apartment and having this moment of, like, I'm so fucking jealous of you.
It's funny you say that, because I had a conversation with a mom the other day who talked a lot about, it was a mom who's a stay-at-home mom, but she talked a lot about something that comes up often, which is, like, everything changed for me, like, even my self-identity. 100%. And while I know that it changed for him because we added a baby into the picture here, he still is able to like pick up his wallet, pick up his keys, and like go out the door and go to the gym without having to worry about any of the logistics. Because, and again, not that he's doing this on purpose, it's just assumed I'm there, like I'm watching the baby. But when I think about what I would want to do at 7 a.m., I'd have to make sure I'm getting him, like, can you be home so that I could go
Okay.
do the thing?
I want to challenge this because I had this conversation with my friend. Well, twofold. One, I used to feel jealous in those moments because his body could physically
Do it, yeah.
Yes, his world was rocked in the sense that we added a kid, but he did not lose his sense of self.
Right.
Which I felt I did.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be physically, mentally, there's just so much going on that they will never, any non-birthing partner, experience because they simply did not go through that
The follow-up to what this mom said was like, she's like, but I don't even know what I would do if I could go.
My challenge to that is, and the perfect example of this, it happens every day in probably everyone's household, is like one partner potentially has the ability to just go to the bathroom and take a poop and the other partner is like, I really have to go, can you do this? Like, and I realized that was the norm in so many relationships, and I was just like, well, I'm just gonna start
go to the bathroom.
Go to the fucking bathroom. Like, I think it happens because of the beginning of motherhood, where if you are a birthing person, you're potentially breastfeeding or you're recovering or you're doing more skin to skin. Like, so more with the kid inherently falls on you. Yeah. And then it almost becomes the norm, and we have to challenge that back where like now I just say I have to go. I'm going.
Right.
It's not like, yes, sure, we both are asking each other logistical questions to leave the house.
But you're not asking permission.
But I'm not asking permission to do also humanly tasks that need to be done. Let's make that very clear. Like a shower. We all fucking deserve a shower. That's not like a gift of time. Like, oh, you should like go take some time. We deserve to all shower in peace. We deserve to all poop in peace. Mm-hmm. So I think like making sure that playing field is even and challenging your partner, like that should be non-negotiable in my opinion. But the other thing I wanted to say about, I just want to come back really quick about not festering in terms of harboring emotions that lead to resentment, is the other thing that I found very impactful, and I'm going to mess up the actual verbiage, but it's like to speak when emotions are low and thought process is high versus high emotion, low thought process. Because I know when I'm very emotional, I'm not even thinking. And like if you breathe the wrong way, I want to scream. And that, for me, I've learned is not the time to speak up. That's the time to take a second and walk away. Yeah. And come back when I've calmed down a bit and be like, what happened 30 minutes ago, yesterday, a week ago, made me feel XYZ. And I think those words are so important. It's not like you did this, the pointing fingers. Yeah. And I think this goes both ways. Yeah. But more like, when this happened, I felt, and I don't want to feel that way. And here's what I would have liked you to do differently.
Right. One thing that you just triggered my memory of is the I statements, which I feel like a lot of people struggle with. And I think gets couples into big trouble when we do the you, because immediately, and this isn't just couples, but immediately the person receiving the you statement is in defense mode.
Of course.
And so that's probably one of the hardest feedback like that moms will give is, okay, I tried the I statements this week and oh my God, I realized I talk in you statements like 24/7. So I just wanted to highlight that, like, speaking in I statements is so powerful because you're owning the feeling. Like you just gave the example 2 weeks ago when XYZ happened, I really felt angry and here's how I think it could look different going forward. I think people don't realize how important a small little tweak in the way that you're communicating makes a huge difference. And then another thing that I want to highlight, when my husband and I were getting married, we had to do pre-Cana. We got married in the Catholic Church. Okay. And the priest met with us one time. And then we came back, and he was like, I noticed something about you guys. You both really want to win. Like, you both want to be the one that says, like, I won. And he said, I could see that coming up negatively when you're married, like, in an argument. And that has always stuck with me because sometimes, to your point, like, when you're going back to a discussion that happened weeks ago or last week or a day ago, be really self-aware of like, am I trying to prove myself here and win something? Because if so, nobody wins. Like,
Nobody
even
wins.
if you do feel like, okay, I shelled it out, I really gave it to him, like, nobody really wins, because there's always some feeling of like, now we're both sad, like,
Right.
I defeated you, like, so no one really ever wins. So think about like what, and this is the other thing, when you're in the throes of the 4th trimester, there's not a lot of time for thinking, like,
No.
and that's why a lot of what you just said, like high emotion, that's when the conversation is happening, because you've reached your max, you're absolutely done with his shenanigans or bullshit that he's pulling, and you're like, and now I'm going to tell you with sleep deprived eyes, like, you suck, like, and you're not showing up for me. And that's that's how he hears it. I suck, I'm a bad dad, like, I'm a bad partner. So it's hard when you're really in the throes of it, and that's why I feel like it's so important to go into it knowing that these things are going to probably hit you. And like you said in the beginning, if they don't, great. If you're listening to this and you're like, I had the complete opposite experience,
fucking amazing.
come on this show and tell everybody what it was, because there's moms out there and couples out there that need practical advice like that, but you never win. And know what you're going into the discussion, like, revisiting. And I'm a big proponent. I tell my mom so many times, they'll come on the call like, something happened with my husband, I should have wrote it down, but it's still bothering. I don't even know what it was, like, because the argument is so
small,
petty and small. It's like you're fighting over like who put the milk where after they made the coffee. So like, I will encourage them, I'm like, like, make note of that and come back to it when the feelings aren't huge, so that you don't say something that you're going to regret.
I also think, not to like completely triple down on this, but the you statement, it's really, I want to be very specific in this. If you're referencing something that happened, it's really like to avoid the defensive. And we both do this because I fuck up. I'm not the perfect partner whatsoever. But it's when, for instance, we'll use the milk as the example that you just said. When the milk was left out and then it spoiled, and then we realized we were out of milk, that made me feel really just forgotten, because clearly I was going to make a coffee and wanted my milk later, and now I'm left without milk.
Right.
And that made me sad, whatever. Instead of when you left the coffee out, like, there's such a difference of when the coffee was left out, even if they did it.
Right.
Even if they were the one that left the coffee out, versus when you left the coffee out, it's received so differently.
Right. It's immediate blame with the you.
Yeah. This is really, I'm like contemplating sharing this, but I will. Take this for what it is, and you do not have to implement this. But my husband and I revert to some silly tactics. I don't know if it's because we've been together since we were 16, so like we still feel like kids sometimes. He's a silly like, I don't know. There's just a lot of silliness in our household. And there are ways that we try to connect when we feel disconnected, whether it's like a 1-minute hug in the morning, like truly just holding each other, like not breaking contact. For some reason, it's the moment that my dog loses his shit, which makes it even harder. But like, he hates us like staying still and hugging. It's a very odd thing. But we even do this with our toddler now, where we like call it rewind, and we're like, do we need to rewind? Like, if we get heated, sometimes it'll be a pause and be like, do we need to rewind? Or if he can tell I'm just in a fucking mood that morning, and everything is just like, you can tell when someone's energy is off, and we literally like shake our bodies as if like you're rewinding a movie. Our toddler does it the best now, because he's like a little kid who finds it hilarious, but we'll be like blah, 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 and like truly shake it off and like make that sound. And I don't know if it's like the silliness of it that takes you out, or who the fuck knows, but it actually kind of works sometimes.
It's a great tip.
And for parents now, we do it with our toddler all the time, when he's just in that mood that you can't break. Like, they're just like tantrum, angry, nothing you say is making sense. I'll be like, should we rewind? And I'm gonna rewind first. Who's gonna do it? And then he like is dancing and happy and smiling, we move on. So that's a small tip for anyone.
It's a great tip to implement. But also what you said something there, you'll wake up in a really bad mood and he just knows it. I think the importance of not agreeing to not meet the person. It's so easy to meet your partner
so
at
easy.
5 a.m. when nobody has slept, or, you know, you have a toddler and now you have a newborn and one person's in a bad mood. I have definitely been in a position where I'm like, what's your problem?
Oh,
I was up last night like 6 times. How many times were you? Right. So we go to this, and I think a lot of new parents will have been there before too. It's like, who has it worse?
of course.
Right. So if you're in this mood, I woke up in a fine mood. Like, now I have to meet you there. It's like, you don't. You can do a tip or something like you just said. In our house, because we have 3 and it's constantly chaos, we play the Barnum and Bailey circus song on the Alexa when it starts to get like really crazy and like people are tantruming and my husband, like, we're both getting stressed out by the kids. It's like, Alexa, play the Barnum and Baileys, and then it's just a minute to just like, then we start laughing, and we're laughing, and like the kids, somebody stops like freaking out, like, and that's just what we do. So to your point, using humor, reconnecting, I said this in being like, leaning in, and I talk about this in my marriage guide, when you really desperately want to lean out is probably the hardest skill to work towards in a relationship after you've had the baby. And another thing that I really talk about is what you described, I feel like, is emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
And we're so hyper focused on physical intimacy after baby, like that 6-week checkup, like, when can we get back in the bed again? It's like, people underestimate the power of a hug, a touch.
Yeah.
Just sitting there, like, do you need me to just sit with you and like be in this moment? Because when you build on emotional intimacy and connection, like, that perpetuates you wanting to be eventually, when you feel up to it, physically intimate with your partner.
And in terms of physical intimacy, I say this all the time, but like, foreplay starts in the morning.
Yeah.
And foreplay is
I just saw a post on this. Yeah. And yesterday it was like, foreplay is happening all throughout the day.
Oh.
And the hook was like, I was like, wait a minute.
It is not in the bed.
Right.
It's emptying the dishwasher in the morning.
Yeah.
Like,
That's what the whole post was about.
that is hot.
Right.
Katy Perry said on Call Her Daddy. It was like, when he empties the dishwasher and puts everything where it's meant to be, like, you're getting a blowjob. Like, truly, that's foreplay for many of us now.
Right.
It's because it's so deeply in that emotional intimacy of like, you're caring for me or our kids or whatever, and taking something off of the plate. Like, everyone just wants things taken off the plate, especially moms. And the importance of not necessarily meeting your partner where they're at if they're in a negative is so important. It's something I'm constantly working on. My husband is much better when I'm in a bad mood of like trying to help me.
Yeah.
When he's not in the best mood, I'm like, what the fuck does it matter? Snap out of it.
Right.
So I'm working on it. But I think another thing you mentioned that's really important is to not play the suffering Olympics and to not do the tit for tat, because that leads to a lot of resentment. It leads to a lot of defense.
Right.
It leads to a lot of competition in an unhealthy manner of like, I did this, you have to do that. Or like, well, I did this 5 times and you only did it once. Like, not keeping score, I think, is very important, with the caveat being that you're implementing things for it to be as even as a playing field as it can be.
Yeah. The tit for tat gets you nowhere. It's so
nowhere.
It's so hard. Yeah. And it's hard not to do when you're talking, like the example you gave before about like being a breastfeeding mom. My friend and I were just talking about this on the phone last night. She's like, don't you remember like being the one up all in the night because you chose to breastfeed and you're not pumping yet and you don't have a bottle to give the baby and you're just staring at him laying there like useless. And she's like, but it's not his fault.
No.
Like, he literally can't do it.
With our first, he would be up with me.
Yeah.
For every single feed, which is like, we stopped that after a few days because we realized there was actually no point because for us
sleep.
both to be exhausted the next day.
Right.
But I just remember like sitting in our apartment breastfeeding, him like sitting next to me just like watching.
Right.
And him like kind of like doing that like in class where you're like trying to not fall asleep, and me being like annoyed but also like, in reality, why were we both awake? There was no need for him to be sitting there watching me do this.
In theory, it sounds nice.
Yeah, obviously the second time that did not happen, because we're like, we need a sane human for this toddler. Speaking of outside of the roommate phase, but just postpartum moms, like, what do you think is the most helpful advice to give someone entering this phase, whether it be their first, second, third time?
Honestly, I feel like for moms who are coming into it like you said, whether it's their first baby or their fourth baby, is just knowing that each experience is so vastly different, especially for the moms who are doing it again. Like, this is me telling myself that each experience is so different than the experience that you had before, that if it is your second, third baby, to try not to have any expectation for what it's going to look like, similar to what you said about the roommate phase, because I've lived it, right? Like, I remember saying to myself, like, breastfeeding, like the second time, easy peasy, I've got this, they're worked in, they're ready to go. And there I was, like, bleeding raw on the couch, like screaming Buck every time he would latch on, and I'm like, I already did this before, like, why are they like this? Completely took me by surprise that was still hard the second time. So that, like, for a mom who's going to do it again, and even like somebody like me, I'm already preparing myself for, like, this could look very different. And even for the moms, I know you talk about this on your Instagram, who had raging anxiety. I work with moms who are like, I am so terrified to have another kid because of how bad my anxiety and depression was, is that even though that was your experience the first time, it may not be your experience the second time. And the biggest thing I would say there is, like, get into therapy. The best emails I get, I love all my clients, but I'm always like, yes, when I get a mom who's like, hi, I'm 7 months pregnant with my first, I'm like, great, let's do an intro call.
Right.
Because that is when you do have the time to sit down and have a conversation and prep for postpartum to look however it's going to look, but make sure that you have supports in place for you regardless of how it looks. But for the mom who's expecting her first, outside of the tip I just gave, like, get into therapy, and not just with anyone, get into therapy with maternal mental health therapist who can help you in specific ways. And connect yourself to resources before baby gets here.
That's a huge one. I told my friend to do that, and, like, she texted me being so grateful, for instance, like a lactation consultant, even if you choose not to breastfeed or
I wish I had that with my first.
With bottle feeding, it's important. Like, I remember with
you're
my
scrambling
first,
when you're in the throes of it to try to figure something
out. And I've
had
so many friends text me being like, SOS, I'm on day 3, this baby's not latching, who was your lactation consultant? Then they're waiting to get in, did they take your insurance, whatever. The Lactation Network is incredible to go on, and it will tell you your network, who's accepts your insurance, like where they are based on your location. I've used them for my second pregnancy to find a lactation consultant, and, like, many of my friends have used them. Doing that before you give birth is so helpful to have that contact. So if you need one, whether it's bottle, pump, formula, whatever, you can call and be like, hey, can I come in? Like, I have a 3-day-old and they're not taking the bottle, or I can't get the latch right, or whatever it is.
And the same goes for mood and anxiety stuff when it comes to, you are not, and as somebody who's experienced anxiety in postpartum, you're not going to be like, excuse me, I need help. Right? It's like, I always say to the moms that I work with, instead of reaching out for help, we want a mom to be able to just reach in. Everything you just said, a lactation consultant, somebody that can help with perinatal mood and anxiety. Your partner should know every single red flag. Like, right now, I'm prepping my own husband.
Yeah, Joe met with my team.
These are all the things that you should look out for perinatal mood and anxiety stuff that I may not be able to say, like, oh, this is what's happening to me. So that's a huge tip for somebody.
Giving them their contact info. Like, I made sure Joe had my therapist and my psychiatrist contact info, and being like, these are the red flags they told me to look for. If you see this, and I'm not speaking about it, and even if I tell you it's okay, I give you permission to reach out to them.
You have to be the one to reach out.
And I gave my people permission to speak with him.
Right. The resources is huge. I always say, too, like, the baby can't leave the hospital until you bring the carrier in. They inspect the carrier. They come in. They tell you. I remember with my son, they're like, he can't leave until you have a appointment set up. I'm like, it's Christmas Eve. Like, no one's going to even pick up that. I mean, I'll call, and obviously they had an on-call to set up the appointment. But, like, you won't let the newborn leave without a 48-hour appointment. But with the mom, you're like, we'll see you in 6 weeks and hope to God that you make it through.
If you pass a blood clot larger than a golf ball. That's what they said to me. And I'm like, you think I'm waiting until the blood clot is the size of a fucking golf ball to kill you?
I'll be on the horn way before that.
Bitch, please. Like, I will be here tomorrow if something near the size of that comes out of my body.
We don't prep moms enough. It's really sad. And that's the whole reason I've been a therapist for 10 plus years, but I didn't niche down to moms until I was pregnant with my third, with Cam. And I was like,
that, Cameron.
Yeah, Cameron. I'm like, what? There is absolutely no support for moms. And that's when I was like, that's it. I need CEUs for my license. Like, I'm going to do it in perinatal mental health. And then it just opened this whole world of like, wow, there really is no support. Like, society is like, hey, you did this, you had this baby, great. Like, come on back. You know, workforce is
we're
like,
gonna judge everything you do, by the way.
Right. And come back to work in 8 weeks looking like you didn't have a baby. It's like, it's so unrealistic, and it just sets up so many moms for failure or for self-doubt. Like, I wasn't built to do this.
Or isolation.
Right.
Of like, I'm so alone in this. No one else is feeling this way. Everyone else is doing it. And I think social media can be such a gift in connecting with people.
Yeah.
And it can also be such a curse in seeing someone do something and not having all of the like information behind the scenes.
Right.
Even childcare. That's why I'm so open about I have a full-time nanny. Like, I could never fucking do all the things I'm doing without that. Not a chance in hell.
No.
But we're not always getting a full picture. And even though I say that, someone might not know that. And then they're comparing.
Right.
Like, it can be very toxic in that way. Something I'm a huge proponent of is filling your cup and finding time for yourself. I think it's imperative for every person's mental health, especially moms. So we have a new segment to close out the show called Filling My Cup. How do you fill your cup, and like as specific as possible?
So I have like non-negotiables.
Hit us with them.
One of those things is nails. And I know I always say on my Instagram, like, nails is not your thing, then like find your non-negotiable. Totally. But for me, I'm like, every 2 weeks I will make an appointment. And I talk to the moms. I practice in my own marriage. I'm like, I don't ask permission to get my nails done, but I do like gather information to make sure that I can go at that time.
Well, it has to, logistically,
like you said,
partners,
logistically,
like you have to schedule. No one can just walk out.
You need to pick up the babies because I'm going to get my nails done, right? Unless you tell me that you have like an appointment, that's what I'm doing. So that's one of my non-negotiables. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel put together. Like, I enjoy doing it. Another thing, I actually just shared this. I did a post yesterday on here's all the things I wish that I knew being fresh in the fourth trimester. There's something about getting ready, and I don't care what that looks like. Like a friend commented on the post, like changing from my milk stained overnight loungewear to like fresh loungewear for the day. There's something about the routine of like going into the bathroom and doing basic hygiene, like you said,
that we all deserve,
and being ready, because there's something about that feeling that makes me feel like, okay, this could be the shittiest day of all time, but I started it feeling put together. And so like that makes me feel empowered and ready to take on the day.
And on that note, I used to hate in postpartum when I had sundown scaries, like so many of us do.
Yeah.
And it would be 5:30 and the sun setting,
oh my God,
and I
what
looked
is up
down,
with that?
and I'm like,
I had the same thing.
In my fucking pajamas from last night.
Right.
I haven't brushed my teeth yet today.
Not a
like
good
that
feeling.
Just adds to
perpetuates
the
it so much.
insanity.
Yeah.
And so I agree. It was never an actual outfit for me.
Right.
I mean, with my second, I was at a fucking Halloween parade 8 days postpartum, which is crazy,
different.
but that was just the life. It was his first school parade, and I wasn't going to miss it.
Right.
But like taking the 10 minutes to go into my bathroom, even during the baby's first nap, it doesn't have to be first thing in the morning.
Right.
To just brush my teeth, wash my face, take off the milk-drenched, sweaty-ass clothes I slept in, and put on a new pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Like, that just felt like, okay, I can do this.
Right. Those are, like, basic non-negotiables that I have to do. But then outside of that, like, scheduling time with moms, like, that I, like, moms that I've met through preschool or, friends that I've had a long time, like, and just making a night to say, like, I'm going out at 7:45, like I'll do some of the bedtime prep, and then, or don't do any of it all if you don't want to.
Honestly, I love a girls' night at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, an early bird.
Early girls' night, so that like you're not doing the bed. I'm sorry, like sure, do I love singing my son his song every night or both of them? Yes, but like once in a blue moon, not doing that and having a night to myself, and then getting back where it's not too late, the best gift.
Right.
I do also want to say on that note, because I don't know if this was brought up, but you brought up a really good point that I will be now referencing of like when you want to lean out, lean in.
It's so hard, but it's so necessary.
Finding what quality time looks like for you two and what's actually accessible. Like, you're not going to be going on a date 2 weeks postpartum, but you could be playing a card game on the couch for 30 minutes when the baby goes down. Like, it doesn't have to be big. And then eventually when you hit a place that you can spend some time outside the house, like finding that quality time for yourself. It could be date nights in, it could be date nights out, whatever it is.
A day date. I feel
day
like
date,
those are so underrated.
So underrated. But like I'm personally still working on that 11 months out, trying to prioritize fun again, just with my partner. Because we're really good at prioritizing fun for our family.
Right.
We're really good at prioritizing fun individually. And we have kind
what
of
about
dropped
us?
the ball on prioritizing fun for us. And that is a way when you set the discussion of we're not talking about the kids.
Yep.
We're not talking about school. We're not talking about naps. We're not talking about any of that shit. For you guys is a really important way to reconnect.
Yeah.
One way that can be done that is a very low-hanging fruit in my opinion is if you both read. Like I think watching a show together can be nice, but it just kind of is like, I don't know. I'm rarely discussing a show afterwards.
Right.
Reading a book together, maybe
like
it's
a little
because
book
we
club.
both like reading a lot. We have not successfully done this. Well, actually, we read one at different times. We tried to read one together, and I gave up because it was A Little Life, and I was like, I fucking hate this book. I'm out. But he's now reading one of my favorite books ever, and I'm so excited
To have a conversation.
to talk to him about it when he gets to certain points, and that's how I felt about Fourth Wing when he read it. So, like, that's a very fun little one if both of you read.
Yeah. I love that one.
For people who want more of you, where's the best place to support you?
So I have a website. Obviously, my Instagram is Mommy Be Well with the underscore, Mommy Be underscore Well. And then my website is the same thing without the underscore, Mommy, MOMME, Be Well.
Just gonna say. Perfect.
So the concept behind that is the me, it represents
I love that.
taking care of you.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. So, and if moms are local in Connecticut, I do the in-person monthly gatherings right in Fairfield.
Awesome.
And then I do virtual gatherings if I can just find. It's so hard to find a time that works for all the moms, but I am. That's like my latest goal before this baby comes is to get a pop-up online. I know it's not the same as in person, but
it allows more people to connect. I mean, look, it's so fucking hard to find a time. I was doing expert chats as part of my Substack, and it's so hard to find a time for moms specifically.
that work, for
and
everyone.
then it was just an additional lift that I was like, I need to take this needs to take a back seat for a hot sec.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Everything will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.